This is the podcast that we ask our guests from in front and behind the camera, how did they get their foot in the door? What was the key to unlocking their success? What's their story? Our guest today started his career in one of the biggest TV shows of all time, Game of Thrones. Now he's knocking on Hollywood's door, having worked with Roland Emmerich in blockbuster Moonfall and J-Lo and Owen Wilson in Marry Me. We chat about why drama school was so important, why his latest role in Netflix smash hit Three Body Problem is the closest he's come to playing himself, and his most embarrassing audition moment. Our guest today is actor John Bradley.
Hey,
Hello!
how you doing, mate?
Came out of nowhere, that scared the hell out of me. How's it going, man? I've been watching your latest show and I've been really enjoying it. How's life? It looks, from my point of view, it seems like it must be pretty good.
It's all right, yeah. I mean, it's such a weird process, especially with this job, because this we started shooting Three Body Problem in, I think, September 2021,
Oh,
and
wow.
so a very long time ago, and it's only just coming out, and so it's been sort of nearly 3 years of it being something for the future, something that's going to come out, and something that you'll have to promote and talk about one day, and then before you know it, it's out and it's a thing of the past, and you have to move on to the next thing. It's kind of the way this industry works in a weird way. But the only thing that you can hope for, and it's happened, fortunately enough, that the work that you do is received well and people enjoy it, and all of that 18 months of shooting and three and a bit years of waiting for it to come out, it's all worth it.
Yeah, that's mad. It just shows you, I mean, that there's a lot of buzz around this show, and when you're watching it, you just kind of presume it was shot maybe a year ago, maybe 2 years. But was that, sorry, did you say because of the pandemic or the strikes? What was the reason for the delay with that?
It was well, we shot it in deep COVID, so
Hmm.
we ended up wrapping a lot later than we kind of expected to. I think we were expecting to wrap in March 22, when we ended up wrapping in August, and then we had to come back for some reshoots, which is pretty common. And then we were supposed to come out in the sort of autumn 23, and then the strike happened, so we couldn't promote it properly. And
Mm.
Netflix, of course, because they'd spent so much money on it, they wanted to give it a decent promotional schedule and a decent push, and so then it was pushed back to January 24, and then ultimately it was March 24. So it's been a bit of a difficult birth, but I think that in a way that filled you with sort of more confidence as it was going on, because you were like, it feels a bit like, oh, Netflix aren't going to release this until they feel it's as good as it can possibly be and the right time for it to be released. And they weren't going to rush it out, and they weren't going to kind of release it to the public before they felt it was exactly the right moment to do so. And it
Mm.
can get a bit frustrating sometimes, but you just got to trust their strategy. And I think the wait was worth it, and the wait kind of helped the show kind of get born,
And it's a
because the anticipation of it. We first did a promotional. We first shown the first footage of it to an audience in Brazil last year in June, and then when you consider that we didn't come out until March, that's a very long
Mm.
lead up for something. So getting that anticipation going and getting people's mouths watering for it, and I think Netflix are really good at that, and the show benefited from that ultimately, I think.
And your characters are great. I mean, it's a really interesting character. When you first got the script for this, was it kind of usual audition process? How did you come to be in this show?
Well, no, it was. It's never really happened like this before. Back in January 2021, I got a phone call from my old Game of Thrones bosses, David Benioff and DB Weiss, who I hadn't spoken to for probably over a year at that stage, since we finished sort of promoting Game of Thrones, and they said, "We're going to do this new thing. We're not going to tell you what it is. All we're going to say is we've written a character in it especially for you, and it's
Wow.
based on you, and you're probably not going to play a character that's as close to your own personality as this character is. We're not going to tell you what it is, but keep the second half of the year free if you possibly can, and come aboard." And I didn't know what it was, and I didn't really have to know what it was, because as soon as I knew that they'd written it for me, and I just knew that it was going to be a character that I'd be interested in playing. And nobody is more qualified to write a character that reflects my personality more than them, because I'd known them for, by that stage, I'd known them for over 10 years.
Mm.
And we spent a lot of time socializing. And I think, and you know, I think that it occurred to them since Game of Thrones that I was playing characters that were sort of similar to the character that I played in Game of Thrones. And they knew that that was nothing like my my own personality, really. So it was like they were giving me the opportunity to play a part that nobody else would have ever given me to play, I don't think. And as soon as I found out it was Three Body Problem and looked into what that the source material and what kind of project that was going to be, I just had to take my hat off to them, really, because having adapted something like Game of Thrones, which was so complicated and such a genre piece and so there's so much scope to it and breadth and so complex, they managed to find a source material that was probably even more all of those things
Mm.
than Game of Thrones was. And I'll be honest, when I started reading a very, very dense Chinese sci-fi novel set in China, I struggled to see how my personality would fit into that too easily. But I just trusted them. And then when I got the script through, yeah, I was delighted with the part and the function that he played within it. And it feels a bit like they've changed my life once and changed my career once with Game of Thrones, and it feels like they're doing it again by giving me this completely different type of part to play.
Mm. That's funny you should say that's the closest character you've ever played to yourself, because I obviously I don't know you, but I know you from shows that you've been in, films you've been in. And
Yeah.
I was going to say it's a very different role for you, but then you're saying, you're playing a character actually close to your own identity. What was that like, playing a character so close to yourself?
It was it's funny you should say that, actually, because I was thinking that recently. An audience will first impressions count so much in life and in, you know, TV and film. And an audience will see the first ever part that you've played and assume that that's you, because they've got absolutely nothing to compare it to, especially when it's a character that was so much of a sort of character piece as that as
Mm.
Samwell was in Game of Thrones, and a character that they knew for over a decade. They'll think that's you, and therefore, if then you play a character that's closer to yourself, they think that that is the big transformative
Mm.
acting performance. It's kind of weird. It's a bit like they'll see me more or less playing myself and be like, wow, have you seen this new kind of character that he's created? And you don't sort of think that, no, the part that you think is me, that was me creating the character. And this thing is a slightly more simplified version of my own persona. But it actually felt like a bit of a break, to be honest, because, you know, Jack Rooney, my character in Three Body Problem, he's very self-assured and very confident and very happy with his place in the world. On the surface, at least, that's the side of himself that he presents, just very comfortable in his own skin. And that is a large part of me, but that is the part that I think I'd want to be all the time.
Mm.
I think, you know, there's a lot more to me than that, but I think that if I could be any parts of me, it would be that. So just to get a uh, play a character that goes through the world with such a lightness of touch and doesn't let anything get on top of him and just enjoys himself and enjoys his life and is very comfortable with his position in the world. It felt really sort of liberating, and having
Mm.
been used to playing characters that have a lot of pain and have a lot of self-doubt and very low self-esteem, it just felt like a bit of a holiday to play somebody who it was just a bit more happy-go-lucky.
And you mentioned there obviously the breaks in your career. Obviously Game of Thrones is an obvious one, and then this again, like people are going to see you as a different character. What was the beginning of your career like? Where did that love of acting and performing, where did that come from? Is there like a family member that influenced you, or friends, or where does that come from?
I think, well, for a start, we weren't a very sort of dramatic household. Like, I don't come from an industry family or anything. To be honest, we never really went to the theatre when I was growing up, and we didn't really watch that many films. It was just that we watched a lot of comedy.
Mm.
It was mainly comedy at home, and it's comedy that's influenced me every step of the way, really. And I think that, like, I even as a kid, I can remember watching comedy on television, watching a lot of British stuff. So people like people like John Cleese and Rick
Mm.
Mayall and Rowan Atkinson, and just watching them and thinking, God, they're making me so happy. It's crazy that that's their job, and B, I'd love to one day be able to make people as happy as they're making me while I'm watching them. It just
Mm.
felt like a really sort of privileged position to be in, and I, even to this day, I choose my friends based on the kind of comedy that they like, because I
Yeah.
think it sort of tells you everything about, and also the comedy that they don't like. I think it tells you an awful lot about a person's, um, their self-awareness and their sort of morality, if you like, depending on what kind of comedy that they like. So I built a group of friends around me that liked the young ones and liked Bottom and Blackadder. And
Classics.
we just sort of lived in our own little world and wrote little sketches and put on, never did anything with them, never shown them to anybody else. It was just purely for the love of just being silly and being funny. And I think that's how I got started, really. Just wanting the whole life of somebody like Rick Mayall, wanting
Mm.
to write comedy with my best friends and perform with my best friends, and it just seemed like an amazing way to spend your life. And that was I never thought I'd ever get there, but if I could live any type of life when I was growing up, that was the type that was the life that I'd have loved for myself when I was a
Mm.
kid.
Mm. Oh man, those some of those absolute classics. Like, I mean, Blackadder is one of those ones which, as a kid, like characters like Flashheart and things like that,
Yeah,
it's a shame because I don't think something like that would be made now. I mean, there's quite obvious reasons to why, but you can
yeah.
still go back and really enjoy just the absurdity of it. And yeah, Rick Mayall just would come into any scene, wouldn't he, and just steal the show.
Yeah, I dumped the kite on the proles, so send a car. General Melchett's driver should do. She hangs around with a big knob, so she'd be used to a fella like me. Woof, woof!
Look, you think you can make your obscene phone calls somewhere else?
Well, that's exactly the type of actor that I've always liked. And I think Rick was the kind of ultimate version of that, where somebody comes on and you just think, oh, great, it's Rick Mayall. And it doesn't matter how long he's on the screen for. If he's on for 5 minutes, I'm just going to absorb. I'm going to put matchsticks in my eyes and just absorb every single second of what he's about to do.
Mhm.
And I think that it's weird that when you're a kid, you watch these things and you sort of accept them, and you don't really think about the work that's gone into them necessarily. It's only since I've grown up and started performing myself that I've realized how extraordinary some of these performances actually are.
Mm.
If you take something like Mr. Bean, which I
Mm.
loved as a kid, and a lot of people write off as being silly and Mr. Bean stupid, and you know what I mean, there's not much kind of intellectually to it. It's only when you grow up and start performing that you think, oh my God, this is an immaculate performance.
Mm.
Every single thought is written so clearly on his face
Yeah.
and in his body, and nothing's by accident. Everything's been worked out right to the very last percentage of detail. He knows exactly what he's doing, and everything's deliberate. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
if you see Mr. Bean
yeah.
and then you see Blackadder,
Mm.
there's no prosthetics going on. There's no mad costumes or anything like that, but it's a completely different face.
Mm.
It's
Mm.
not the same face. He doesn't look like the same guy. And it's just something to do with the way he sets his face as those two different characters. They're just not the same person. And I think that kind of, you're oblivious to that as a kid, but as you get older and you start to know the rules of performing, it's only then that you realize, God, I did like all the right stuff when I was a
Mm.
kid.
Mm.
I just
Mm.
didn't know. I took it on face value, but I was right to think all that stuff was really extraordinary, because it definitely is.
Mm. Yeah, naturally drawn to it. And as you say, Rowan Atkinson, those two parts, Blackadder and Mr. Bean, as you say, couldn't be more different. And the fact that they're both comedic performances, but can be so vastly different and so
Yeah,
iconic individually it's madness. For an actor to come up with one iconic role like that
yeah.
is mind blowing, but two, and I'm sure to be honest, there are other roles that he's done that have been, you know, as big as well. But okay, so the influences were obviously like sort of British sitcom TV comedy. And
Yeah.
did you ever see yourself going into, because obviously you've done a lot of dramas, you've done Hollywood movies, all these other things. Looking back at that moment, being, you know, this little kid watching TV, did you ever kind of imagine that you would be where you are now?
No, no, definitely not. I didn't even know how to even get started. There was no blueprint really, and I'd like to think it's getting better now. But for me, being a sort of working class kid from Manchester whose parents didn't know anybody in the industry, or I didn't know. I mean, my parents didn't have the types of didn't have dinner parties at all, but they certainly didn't have the type of dinner parties where TV producers were popping round. So it just felt like a completely closed shop, and it's just sort of felt like something that happened to other people. Really, I didn't even know what drama school was before I got there. It took a friend of mine when I went to college to tell me about. There's this thing called drama school where you can go for 3 years and learn how to be an actor. I never thought something so perfect would ever exist. And yeah, it just felt like something that happened to other people, and I was, you know, doomed to be just a consumer of it my whole life, and wondering what could have happened if I'd a bit, you know, gone down a slightly different path. But no, it sort of happened to work out, and I never would have thought I'd start to, you know, get into Hollywood, especially, and you know, I just had no expectations at all, and I think that sort of set me up for the rest of my career, really, in terms of, you know, not just seeing every job as being a bonus, and if you don't expect to get anywhere, the fact that you get anywhere at all is. You know, you just feel incredibly lucky and incredibly privileged, and it gives you a work ethic, which makes you feel I've really got to be at the top of my game all the time if I want to stay in. I don't know how I've got in, but now I've just got to work hard enough to make sure that I stay in.
So drama school was really the key to like the first couple of steps of getting your foot in the door.
Oh, totally, yeah. Just the idea that you can hang around for 3 years and just be with people who have exactly the same interests as you all day, and you get to read plays and get to learn about the theatre in a way that you never would have otherwise. And then ultimately, I would never have been seen by a group of casting directors or a group of agents otherwise. Even if you come out of drama school and not much of it's gone in terms of process and in terms of learning the craft, the idea that you get to perform at the end of it to 200 agents, and then they can see what they want and express their interest in you, and you may sign with an agent and you may start working. That was the only chance I would have had to make that happen. So yeah, drama school was the making of me, and I really, really enjoyed it. I had a brilliant time. I know a lot of people don't have a great time at drama school, and it can make or break you in terms of whether you decide acting's for you or whether you decide it absolutely isn't. But I didn't miss a single second of it in 3 years. I never had a single day off. I couldn't wait to get up and go in and continue with that process. I had a brilliant time, and yeah, I can't recommend it enough to kids who, like me, don't really have a map and a path forward. It'll be the making of you, I think.
And you mentioned the showcase there, obviously, where all the agents come and watch your final piece. Was that the moment that you got your agent and then started auditioning? Was that the process that you went through?
Yeah, I did. I did my showcase. We did one in London and one in Manchester. I did a monologue, and I did a duologue with a friend. And then, yeah, after that, agents started calling up in the next couple of days saying, "Would you like to come in for a meeting?" And I met with a few of them, picked my favorite one out of that group, and then yeah, Game of Thrones was my first audition.
Wow.
And it came in pretty quickly, actually. I think I signed with them in the April, and then I auditioned in the following month.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, when I went for that audition, never would have thought in a million years that I was going to get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just thought, oh, well, this is my first audition. I just need to prove to my agent that she was right for taking me on and
Mm.
right for taking a chance on me. And then I got a recall through, and then I went back in and met David and Dan for the first time and managed to get the part. And it just all felt very sort of it was so completely unexpected. It didn't feel real for a very long time. And actually the elation of it was very brief
Mm.
because I got this, I got the phone call to say I got the part, and I told everybody, my parents, and they were happy for me, and I was happy. And then suddenly I was a bit like, oh fuck, I've got to do this now.
Yeah, that's the yeah.
That's the thing. I've managed to get myself through this audition, but I didn't feel qualified or trained
Mm.
or able to take on this kind of project, especially because I associated at the time HBO with Sopranos and The
Mm.
Wire, like two of the sort of big crowning achievements of in TV history. I thought, because suddenly I'm in that company now, and I
Mm.
just did not feel qualified or capable of doing the job. And I got through it through a season one, especially through very compassionate bosses, compassionate directors, and a good cast around me. But no, there was no way that I felt ready.
That's yeah, that's the funny thing, isn't it? You've got, yeah, I finally got a job, or like, in your case, like you got the first job, which is incredible, and then you're kind of like, oh, actually, this is now a huge amount of pressure on me to now perform.
Yeah,
I'm being paid now to be an actor. Um,
that's what it is. And I think that as soon as you start to get paid for something that you love, you start to love it a bit less. I think. I think that's just the truth of the matter. Your relationship with it changes as soon as there's so much pressure on you, and you hear all the statistics about how many thousands of dollars are being spent per minute on making a drama like that, and you think, God, I'm not doing this anymore just because I love it. So many things and so many people are so many reputations, including my own, rise and fall on how I do this scene now.
mm,
And if I get it wrong, I'm going to let all of these people down. We're going to waste all this money. They're going to regret casting me in the first place. And as soon as you start to feel that pressure, you think, God, I wish I was just back at drama school, messing around with my mates and doing it in front of 20 people who we all know, where the stakes are so low. And it's just about, I think I think a lot of the things about being successful, especially as a performer, is you have to be a decent performer, but you also have to learn how to absorb all of that pressure and still perform when the stakes are that high and everybody's looking at you. I think that's what separates people who do well and people who don't necessarily. It's not talent. It's just being able to shoulder the burden of all of that
mm.
stress, I think.
That's really interesting that you put it that way, because I'm an actor myself, and loads of my mates are actors. We've had loads of actors on this show, and everyone's got different opinions about this, and it's great that you've been honest about that, because I think a lot of people be like, yeah, no, it's fine, whatever, like it was cool, I enjoyed it, but to be honest and say, it can be terrifying, and having that sort of weight on your shoulders. Yeah, no,
Yeah, I
it's
think
interesting.
I think it just depends on who you feel you're performing for. There are some performers, and I wish I was like them in a way, who would just say, "Oh, I just do it for myself." Like
Mm,
I'm not really thinking about what an audience thinks of it or anybody else in the room. I just do it. I just do it for my own expression, and it doesn't really matter if it goes right or wrong. I'll just perform for my own sense of sort of artistic fulfillment. But I've never not had the audience in my mind
mm.
when I've been performing. I sort of want them to like it, and that feels like a slightly cheap way of looking at it these days. When actors will make it, oh, it's all about myself and my own process and what I get from it. I've always been about making an audience enjoy it as much as they possibly
Mm.
can. And if you've got that in your mind, or if you feel, oh, I've got the responsibility for people who've been at work all day, they put something on and they watching me. I want to make it worth it, and I want to reward them for watching it, and I can never sort of get that out of my mind. And I think that's because all the sitcoms and stuff that I watched when I was a kid, you can hear an audience laughing on in the show. You can hear an audience in that studio responding to it, and that response was what I've always been sort of after, and the sort of modus operandi for me doing anything that I do, I think.
And that sense of comic timing as well that you have, I've noticed even in parts where, you know, some actors might have taken it in a way where it wouldn't have been funny, or there wouldn't be a moment of comic relief. But like, well, I'm thinking in Game of Thrones, there's moments where you bring elements of comedy in which two other actors might not have necessarily been there. And is that what it is, that you've got the idea of the audience in your head and you're like, oh, there's a moment here that I can bring some comic relief to the situation?
I think so. I think it's always been my you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, high comedy, belly laughs and you know, all that kind of stuff. It literally can just be a pause and a slight inflection in a sentence that makes it suddenly tickle your ears in a way that is quite funny. And I've always been on the lookout for those things, especially in drama in a way, because, you know, a lot of people say, oh, if there's sort of comic elements to a drama, it detracts from the drama. But I just think it enhances the drama.
Yeah, definitely.
Because suddenly you're dealing with real people, and people, you know, if you're looking kind of, you know, anything that something like COVID that we've had to put up with a couple of years ago, people didn't stop saying funny things just because there's a dire situation going on. In fact, comedy in those situations becomes more important because you're looking for relief, and you know, you're looking for some sense of normality. And I think that I'd always try and find little comic beats, even in the most dramatic and high stakes of circumstances, just because it just makes the character more human. And it makes an audience care about, and you care about characters that make you laugh, and therefore the stakes that they're facing, the jeopardy that they're in, becomes exacerbated because of that, I think.
Well, Tom Hardy's one of the an example of that, where he can play an absolutely horrendous character. It can be a really serious drama, and then he'll find inflections of comic like moments in there, which just relieve the audience as well. And I think, as you say, it kind of just makes it more believable, makes it more real. And have you ever seen the film? This is a bit of a tangent if you haven't seen it, but have you ever seen the film Starred Up with Jack O'Connell?
Yes, I have seen it. Yeah.
So that film is obviously, it's got some very dark elements in it, but there's some beautiful moments of comedy, which I remember seeing it in the cinema and thinking, I did not expect that moment, or, you know, and I just think it can really elevate. I think comedy can, when it comes to like serious subject matters, obviously used in the right way.
Comedy comes from different places. I think that if you know, all my favorite comedy comes from a deep, you know, comes from the characters. It's not necessarily about the writer writing gags and inserting comic beats into the script or into the scenario. But if you get a character that over the course of a story you've started to know and care about, if they do something or say something that's funny, you're gonna laugh at it because you've invested in them. But in drama you have to earn those moments. And yeah, you're so right. You have to use them really sparingly, and they have to come from a place of integrity if they're going to work. But if a bit of comedy comes out of a scenario where you're least expecting it, that's when it's going to be at its most effective. And I mean, you know, it takes something like, you know, I mentioned it before, something like Sopranos, you know, dealing with, you know, serious crime and murder and all sorts of inner turmoil. It happens to be one of the funniest shows you'll ever see as well.
Yeah.
And I think that all the great dramatists and all the great dramas have that mix, and you know, they just know that if they get that ratio right and the timing right, then you can just find these moments that really pierce through all of the drama and really sort of resonate with an audience, I think.
That's so true, actually. Yeah, Sopranos is one of those ones. Like the episode that springs to mind is the one where they're stuck in the woods and they're eating the ketchup.
Oh yeah, amazing.
It's just, and it's one of the best episodes.
Not bad. Mix it with the relish.
You know, programs or movies that influenced you early on. We talked about obviously Blackadder and things like that, but were there any movies growing up that kind of you watched, you were like, I want to be in something like that?
I remember the first time that I saw Spinal Tap. I just couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe that something could be that funny, and because you know I was used to the British sensibility of what funny is, and you know, British comedy of that ilk has a certain rhythm to it and a certain joke structure to it, and it's written in a certain voice. The first time I saw Spinal Tap, I saw something be funny in a way that I'd never seen anyone be funny before, and it blew my mind. And I think now, you know, there's so much that can be learned from that film now about taste, really. It's a remarkably tasteful film because it's 82 minutes long, and yet you can remember so much of it. It's they could have made a 100, they could have, with those characters, you could have made a 2-hour film and everybody would have been happy to get every single minute that they can out of those characters. But the film is 80 minutes long because they wanted every bit of it to be brilliant. If something in a slightly longer cut of it wasn't brilliant, they got rid of it. And I think that now films are getting so long and so bloated, and you know, you have to sit through a 4-hour film, which has amazing moments in it, but you sometimes wish the pace would kind of lift a little bit. To have a perfect 80-minute film where every single bit of it is memorable, you just don't really get that anymore. And you know, I think that, you know, that's the mockumentary format, and I think that's been kind of done to death since, and nobody's ever quite perfected it in the same way that film did. The discipline of it and the tastefulness of it, it's just extraordinary film.
I'm gonna admit something here. I've never seen it.
Oh, you've never seen it?
No, but now you've said that, because it's one of those films I've always meant to watch, and I've just never got round to it. But no, I'll give it a watch for sure.
I mean, I think if you haven't seen it I think the first time you watch it, you'll be a bit like, oh, now I see where The Office came from.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And oh, now I see where, you know, just a lot of, with The Office, especially because it's a mockumentary thing, but just in some of those other sort of, where the dialogue's very low key and it's got that sort of conversational pace to it. A lot of the comic style and the comic disciplines that followed really started in that film. I think it's so influential, and I think that when you watch it for the first time, you will be able to reverse engineer and say, oh, now I see, that bit where David Brent did this, I can work backwards now and see where the inspiration for that came from. And it'd be interesting to know what you think about it, actually. And I think it's, you know, over 40 years old now, but it's so much after it was influenced by it that I can predict it'll still feel incredibly modern and incredibly sophisticated. And I think you'll really enjoy it.
Oh no, definitely. I'll give it a go. Check out the Patreon at patreon.com/lifeinfilm, where you'll get episodes early and uncut, amongst other treats. And don't forget to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you enjoy this episode, please leave us a positive rating. Add us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok at Life in Film Pod, and find our video episodes on YouTube by searching Elliot James Langridge Life in Film. Essentially, please like and subscribe everything. It makes a huge difference. Thank you. This podcast is sponsored by Betterhelp. Do you work in the film industry? Are you freelance? Or perhaps you have a 9 to 5? No matter what you do, mental health affects us all. I struggled early on in my career with the uncertainty of if and when I would ever work again, struggling to pay my bills, or simply with anxiety. Don't know about you, but being an actor, it's very important for me to maintain structure in the downtimes, and I found not only exercise, but talking to someone, for me, was a game changer. And so Life in Film has partnered with Betterhelp to provide you with access to the largest online therapy service in the world. And it can all be done from the comfort of your own home, from a phone, tablet or laptop. No commute, cutting down travel costs, and most importantly, it's affordable. With over 1,000 therapists in the UK, Betterhelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a wide variety of expertise in mental health. If you need someone to talk to and you're thinking of giving therapy a go, Betterhelp is a great option. And being a listener of the podcast, you get 10% off. That's 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lifeinfilm. That's betterhelp.com/lifeinfilm. And back to the show. Do you have advice for actors that are coming into, the business now? I mean, I know things have changed a lot since the pandemic and strikes and everything else, but is there anything, advice you'd give to people that were starting out today?
I think that one of the good things about coming into the industry now is there are so many ways to be creative now. So many platforms that you can be creative on. And, before social media and YouTube and things like that, you could, if no parts were coming in, you could probably write yourself a little play and put it on somewhere above a pub and hope people come and see it. But the thing now is, if it's a bit slow and you're not getting the parts that you think suit your style, you can write something now, film it yourself, put it online, and loads of people could see it. Or these things now have a life outside of you, and I just think that don't just. There's no excuse now really for just sitting and waiting for your agent to ring you up, or waiting to even get an agent and think, well, my career can't start until I get an agent and they phone me up and give me a couple of episodes on Coronation Street or whatever it is. Your career can start whenever you want it to now, because you can be your own writer and you can be your own leading you can be your own writer, your own leading actor. You can film it yourself. You can be your own editor. It's just so much easier now for you to get your work out there. So there's very little reason to just sit and wait for things to happen. I think it's so much easier to originate work now, and that's what my advice would be. Like, think of what you want to be in, and create it.
Well, that's what kind of leads me on to my next question as well, because the downtime is something that actors really have to either struggle with or deal with at some point in their career, most of the career usually. Is there like do you write, do you create videos? Are the things that you do in between work when you're kind of not waiting for the phone to ring, because we've just said that you shouldn't do that, but in between jobs, do you go a little bit mad, or are you all right with the time off? Because you're working a lot, so I guess the gaps are getting smaller.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't really work as much as people sort of think I do, really, and I think that that's it goes back to something that I said before about as soon as you start doing something for a living, your relationship with it changes. So I think it's important to find stuff, especially creative stuff, if you can, that you've got no plans to make a career out of. Like I play the drums and I noodle about on guitar, but not really. I sort of play the drums very, very casually and purely for recreation, and that's exactly the way I want to keep it. Like, if somebody was to say, "Oh, do you want to be in this film where you play a drummer, or would you be interested in joining a band and doing a few gigs?" I'd suddenly not feel the same about drumming all of a sudden. The pressure would be on then to show the world that I can play the drums, whereas I just purely want to play the drums for myself, and and get not worry if I never get better at it. Just enjoy the playing of them and enjoy getting better incrementally, and not have an audience watching me and not have to answer to anybody about it. So I think that's what I do. I think that's the way I do it. Yeah, just finding something that's fulfilling but not connected to my career. Nothing that I'm ever going to think about making any money out of, or even play in front of anybody else. Keeping that very private relationship with it, a very pure relationship with it. I think that helps really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. That kind of, I find like having you know, music, like learning a musician a instrument, or having some sort of structure
Yeah.
can really help. And
Just living at home, living close to home, and having the same friends as I always did. I think that's helped me as well, because you know, if you throw yourself completely into the acting life and only know actors, and you know, move to LA or whatever, and sort of cut yourself off from the life that you once had, you know, this industry's so got such a history of just leaving people behind and saying, right, we don't really want you anymore. And then then you're cut adrift from that life, and then you can't go home either because you burnt all those bridges. So I think that, yeah, just keeping a sense of identity, and reminding yourself of the constants in life. Like my friends from back home that I've known from school or from drama school, they'll always be there no matter what. And I just think touching base with what's always going to be there unconditionally is a way of keeping a level head and keeping some sense of perspective, I think.
You never been seduced by the idea of, you know, going to LA and living out there, and you know, always want to sort of stay rooted at home in England?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I love going to LA, and I flew back from LA just yesterday actually, and I do like it while I'm over there, but there's something about, I mean, when the Three Body Problem promotional thing was happening, we all got billboards on Sunset Boulevard, like big solo character billboards, and I'd never had one before. I never had one throughout all the Game of Thrones, and it was so exciting. It felt like some kind of peak or a moment was happening, and I just loved it for what it was, and took some pictures with it. Took some pictures next to my billboard while the LA Marathon was running past. It doesn't seem like I was just trying to draw attention to myself. It's a complete accident. But then I was thinking, well, I've seen that now, and I've come away from it, and I've come back to Manchester, and I'm sort of telling people about it, and they're interested. But if I lived there, in a couple of weeks, I'd drive past that billboard, and there'd be somebody else on it.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, oh, I used to be up there, and now it's somebody else, and that moment's gone. I think you're so hyper aware of when it's your moment and when it's not your moment. If you're constantly in that environment all the time, but I just sort of hate the part of myself that would care about that. So I just love being there, and I think it's a very unique place, and it's the place that you have to learn to be comfortable in if you're going to sort of do the work that I do, and I'm trying to continue doing in the future. But just get out of there and just reconnect with real life whenever you can, I think.
I mean, I'm gonna have to wrap up in a minute, but I do want to say that you know, I've watched your career since Game of Thrones, and it's so great to see, because you know, there's so many characters in that show, and you see all the actors go off and do different things, and just seeing you come out and do so many great projects is just,
thank you, mate.
It's just amazing, man, because it's one of those shows you just don't know. There's so many characters, you could get lost, and you know, some actors do better than others, but I've really admired the path you've taken, whether it be deliberate or not. It looks deliberate. So congratulations, man, and you know, all the best, and keep going, keep going.
Oh, mate, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
No, my pleasure.
Most embarrassing moments,
You know, in the first kind of few years of my career, I wasn't selective about the auditions that I did at all. I just thought, oh, well, if an audition comes up, I'll just do it just for the experience of it, really. And so my agent said, would you come down to London to do a commercial audition for a health farm in the Netherlands? So I said, yeah, of course I will. I'll come down. I've probably been acting for a couple of years. Game of Thrones had come out, but I just thought, well, that can't, no. I need to keep working, and I had that sort of hunger. So I went down. And it was only when I got there that I learned that the name of the character that I was auditioning for in this series of commercials, the name of sorry, maybe not his name, but the character was down as Fat Adolescent.
Oh, wow.
Right. That was the name of the character, and the whole point of the audition was they said, right, so there's a mark on the floor. We're going to give you a bowl that's supposed to have salad in it, and you eat a bit of salad. You've been filmed doing this. You eat a bit of salad, and then I want you to step onto the mark on the floor. Then as you step on, we'll throw a reaction at you, and you have to act the reaction. So I stepped onto this X, and they were like, right, this time you've lost a bit of weight, but you've not lost as much weight as you think you might have, but you're determined to carry on. Then you have a munch of salad, and then you just walk off. So I said, all right, okay. I was feeling sort of, so I did it, and then did the sort of reaction to it a bit half-hearted. And they said, right, this time you've lost loads of weight and you're really happy with it. So I just kept having to do these reactions, and it went on for quite a long time, like 15 minutes of this. And I didn't get it. And, there are some parts that you're sort of glad you don't get. If I would have walked in there and they'd have gone, right, we're looking for Fat Adolescent, send everybody else home. He's the guy. I'd have been like, oh, well, I'm not that thrilled about that. But the weird thing about that is that, that was the moment when I said to myself, I'm probably going to get a bit more selective about the auditions that I do now.
Yeah.
And I came out of that just feeling like, those types of, I think it'd be a scandal now if that audition happened. But it's fine. It's one of those things. It was just a time and place. And my story of that is, so many people have got much worse audition stories than that. But then I started to think to myself, hang on, Game of Thrones is on now in the Netherlands. Imagine if Game of Thrones is on and then the character that they've just seen killing a White Walker is now playing the part of Fat Adolescent in this in this thing. So yes, so it was that moment really, and just sort of given a character to play that was for an overweight character that was so sensitively written and had so much heart to him and had such a character arc and really overcame so many of his hang-ups and his sense of self-loathing. It felt like a bit of a step backwards to play Fat 100%. Adolescent. I'd like to think I would have lent it something, like given it a bit of something special. But
I'd love to find that now and see
glad that I didn't have to do that one in the end.
Yeah. That reminds me of a time I went for I think I must have read what the audition was for, but I thought, it'll be fine. I'm sure it'll be subtle and tastefully done. And I got there and it was an advert for chlamydia. And it was literally like Joey Cipriani and Friends with the chlamydia boxer shorts. And they were like,
my God.
Can you put these on? And we're going to take a few photos and then see if you look right for the. And I was just, I walked out. I was like, I can't be doing this. Imagine walking into the tube and just seeing a poster of yourself with, the chlamydia boxer shorts on. It's dire.
So you were playing the part of chlamydia, or you were going to be playing somebody with chlamydia?
Yeah, it feels like it could be either way. It was the guy that was meant to have chlamydia, and it was there's this whole scene where the girl is meant to be taking his trousers off and she pulls the and then he's got chlamydia written on his boxer shorts. And I didn't quite realize what I was getting myself into until I was there, and then I snuck out. Once
again, the guy that ended up getting that, imagine it's such a double-edged sword, because you're like, oh, I've got the part, but in a wider sense, I look like I've got chlamydia, obviously.
It's not a good look.
But
it's not.
Sometimes good news is bad news.
Exactly. Well, I think that's a good way to finish our chat. And, yeah, John, thanks so much, man, and all the best. The show's obviously got a lot of buzz around it, and I hope you get the accolades you deserve. And all the best with it, man.
My pleasure, mate. Thanks. Such a pleasure to speak to you, mate. Thanks a lot.
All good. Take care.
Thanks, man. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you to our guest, John. Thank you to his team at Roger and Cohen's PMK. As always, thank you to our sponsor, BetterHelp.